China Global Television Network.
A Rwandan court finds the Hotel Rwanda hero guilty on terrorism charges. A French minister is in Mali to pressure the junta over its links to Russian mercenaries. And what impact has the COVID-19 pandemic had on the Sustainable Development Goals in Africa? We tell you more in the hour. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. And with me in studio is Uche Okoronkwo with a preview of your business news.
Thank you, Lindy. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Uganda enacts its first ever climate-related law to deal with the climate crisis. And the Royal Dutch Shell Company to start producing low-carbon jet fuel at scale by 2025. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, back to you, Lindy.
Thanks, Uche. We start the hour in Rwanda, where one-time hotel manager Paul Rusesabagina, popularly portrayed in the film Hotel Rwanda, has been found guilty on terrorism-related charges. The court found him to be guilty of being a member of the MRCD-FLN, which the Rwandan government has designated a terror group. The group is the militant wing of Rwanda's MRCD party. Rusesabagina has long been a prominent critic of President Paul Kagame's government. He launched into global fame after Hotel Rwanda portrayed him as a hero during the 1994 genocide. He was arrested last year on arrival from Dubai.
The court finds that they should be found guilty for being part of this terror group, MRCD-FLN. They attacked people in their homes, they attacked people in their cars, or even on the road traveling.
Well, let's go to Tanzania now. The country on Monday launched a program aimed at fast-tracking vaccinations against COVID-19. This will involve using mobile vaccination vehicles to reach communities in marginalized areas of the country. According to the country's Permanent Secretary for Health, Abel Makubi, the newly launched program will also involve increasing the number of COVID-19 vaccination centers from about 500 to over 6,000. Tanzania intends to vaccinate about 600,000 people within 2 weeks from the start of the program.
Indeed, Tanzania is trying to accelerate or fast-track its vaccination program after realizing that the numbers or the markers that the government had placed were not hit. In fact, just last week when this sort of scheme, accelerated vaccination scheme, was launched, the Permanent Secretary to the Ministry of Health, Professor Abel Makubi, said that there are some parts, rural parts of Dar es Salaam, where a whole day only one or two citizens would go to get vaccinated. So he was a bit furious at the efforts being done by the regional medical officers as well as the health promotion officers in the various regions in Dar es Salaam. So in terms of launching the campaign, it was launched last week, but they wanted to start today and yesterday with training. So the actual movement of cars and medical officers going to the various regions will start tomorrow.
In international news, security forces in Russia have shot and wounded a gunman who killed at least 6 people at a university in the city of Perm. Footage shows students jumping from windows to escape. Some built barricades from chairs to stop the shooter entering their classrooms. Authorities say at least 24 people were wounded and the shooter has been taken to hospital for treatment. He has been identified as a student of the university and carried out the shooting with a hunting rifle. President Vladimir Putin has expressed his condolences to those who lost loved ones. Now, Australia's Minister for Trade says he will seek a meeting with his French counterpart to ease tensions over Australia's broken agreement to buy submarines. The dispute has stoked fears over Australia's bid for a free trade deal with Europe. But the Australian Trade Minister says he believes the dispute will not harm those talks. The scrapped submarine deal was worth an estimated $40 to $90 billion, Australia has now struck a trilateral security partnership with the US and the UK. Well, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea says the AUKUS security deal could trigger a nuclear arms race in the Pacific. Its foreign ministry has called the agreement undesirable and dangerous. Pyongyang has slammed the US as the chief culprit in toppling the international nuclear non-proliferation system. The DPRK, meanwhile, fired 2 ballistic missiles into the ocean last Wednesday, showing off its weapons for the first time in months. And now let's have a look at some other stories making headlines around the world.
The U.S. has started deporting Haitians who had been staying in a makeshift camp in Texas. 3 flights carrying the deported people arrived in Haiti's capital on Sunday, with more scheduled daily. The sprawling camp under an international bridge that crosses to Mexico attracted several thousand migrants. Thousands of people have fled after a volcano erupted on the Spanish Canary island of La Palma. The eruption on Sunday sent lava shooting hundreds of meters into the air and streaming downhill into rivers. Police say some houses have been destroyed. The Spanish Prime Minister traveled there to assess the situation. The volcano's last major eruption was 50 years ago. A swarm of bees has killed 63 endangered African penguins on a beach outside Cape Town. Authorities conducted tests and found no other external physical injuries but bee stings around the penguins' eyes. They say it was a very rare occurrence. The penguins are a protected species as they face a high risk of extinction.
Well, let's go to news from Mali now. The country says it has the right to seek military support from whoever it wishes. This according to the country's prime minister. Now, this is in response to France and other foreign powers expressing alarm at a report that Bamako was approaching Russian mercenaries for assistance. Speaking to a Malian news site, Prime Minister Choguel Maïga did not confirm whether the government was in talks with any other party. But diplomatic and security sources say Mali's government was close to a deal with a private Russian military contractor. France says such a move would be incompatible with its military presence in Mali as it scales down its counterterrorism operation in the Sahel region. Earlier, we discussed this matter with Dixon Osajie, a security consultant in Nigeria. This is what he had to say.
The situation in Mali is a worrisome situation, and this war began since 2012. And you can see that a lot of lives have been lost in Mali due to various interests and most of these terrorist groups that are hitting so hard on the government. If not for the coup in 2012, I don't think I would have been in this stage. But the reason why we arrived at this stage was because of the 2012 coup that hosted out the then government, based on the fact that the people of Mali are complaining about poverty, maltreatment, and other non-functional government activities. But now, going by the intervention of the Wagner Group from Russia, I think the reason why the African components are taking a departure from that submission or suggestion was because they don't want this situation to escalate. And, the French government also have an interest in Mali, and they've also paid some supreme price in ensuring that Mali return to a state of peace. Well, you see, the junta guys are actually, we are pushing for this Wagner Group to come in as a machinery. For any military guys to push for that, that tells you that their military applications are weak, their defense mechanisms are weak, and if they must call for any engagement, I would not advise them to call for private contractors. They must look inward within the ECOWAS region and the ECOMOG region to ensure that other contingents from Africa come and beef up the security in Mali to ensure that this war is brought to an end. I would not advise and also support the emergence or the invitation of the Wagner Group. But for Mali, the military defense in Mali is very, very weak. They need more of strength. They need to beef up their mechanism. They need to beef up their technological application and their mechanical application in order to contend with such kind of threat in the nearest time.
Kidnappers in Nigeria have released 10 more students who were abducted from a school in Kaduna State in the northwest part of the country. The students had been in captivity for 2 months. Others are yet to regain their freedom. Correspondent Phil Ihaza reports from Abuja.
The unknown gunmen released the students of Bethel Baptist High School in Damishi, Kaduna State, leaving 21 more in their captivity. The school's administrator, John Hayab, said an undisclosed ransom was paid to release 8 students, while another 2 were set free due to ill health. In July, the gunmen invaded the school and abducted 121 students, but many of them have been released in batches since then. Kidnapping for ransom has increased in Nigeria, with more than 1,000 students kidnapped since December. As a result, the United Nations Children's Agency UNICEF says at least 1 million students in Nigeria could miss school this year. President Buhari has banned all state governments from paying any ransom to kidnappers and directed security chiefs to find and arrest the perpetrators. Dozens of kidnappers have been killed and many others arrested by security agents in Kaduna, Niger, Zamfara and other affected states in the region after a massive crackdown that began about 2 weeks ago. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Let's take a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Coming up, a look at the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the Sustainable Development Goals in Africa. Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories. Let's have a look. We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Ethiopia,
Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice. The high-level general debate at the United Nations General Assembly begins on Tuesday. U.S. President Joe Biden and dozens of other world leaders will be in New York to deliver their speeches at the General Assembly in person this year. For more on this, we are now joined by CGTN's John Terrett in New York. John, of course, the UN Secretary General has really opened the General Assembly this year with a call to action related to climate change and, of course, COVID-19. Tell us more about what he had to say.
Well, Lindy, you're absolutely right. And I was just looking at the key issues that might affect the continent of Africa. And in my opinion, they would be things like COVID-19 and the various variants, in particular the Delta variant, but other variants as well, which are affecting the continent of Africa and other parts of the world as well. Obviously, climate change, which really comes into focus in Africa. Food distribution systems, we know the importance of that. And also the issue of clean energy as well. Now, that's just 4 topics, of which there are many, many more. I think it's probably heartening for Africa to remember that 3 members of the Security Council come from the continent at the moment. Of course, they're non-permanent members. I think in 2 cases they may be finishing this year, 2021, but they are Kenya and Niger and Tunisia, representing the Maghreb. So Africa is well represented here and will be well represented in the hall, because we have far more people coming than we expected. The US mission here wrote to everybody, all the members of the United Nations around the world, said, you know, you're welcome, but actually please don't come. Well, well over 100 of them have come. So we have far more leaders turning up to speak in the course of this next, what we call Leaders Week, which is officially known as the general debate, than we were originally expecting. Now, to get an in-depth focus on what will be happening in the course of the whole of the General Assembly, which began last Tuesday, remember, Lindy, and will continue to the end of the year and into 2022 if necessary. Let's turn to Abdullah Shahid. He's the Foreign Minister for the Maldives, and he's been appointed the President of the General Assembly. And he, when he gave a news conference about 7 days ago, said that there are 7 billion people on this planet. And of course, that includes the more than 1.2 billion that live in the continent of Africa. And he said, all we have is hope. And the Secretary General has echoed that in comments that he's made in the last 24 hours as well, where he touched on the fact that we have hope. We are not hopeless. We are not helpless, he said. So among the key issues, obviously COVID-19. Obviously, the pullout of Afghanistan that was very chaotic, with a particular emphasis here, not so much on the pullout, but on the future of women and children and minorities, I think. And then over and above that, vaccine inequality. Now, this is very key for our Africa audience because, of course, here in the United States, as you know, we're awash with vaccines. We've got more than we need. And that simply isn't the case in Africa and many other countries. So he wants to hold a special event either this year or next year in order to try and address that issue, and also a special event to try and address the Paris Climate Change Accord. This will be sometime, I'm told, in October. And the idea will be to try and exceed the goals set out in the original Paris Climate Change Accord, which the United States, remember, was a part of. Then it was out under President Trump, and now under President Biden, it's back in again. Lindy.
Well, thank you so much, John. Clearly a very busy agenda for world leaders this week. That was John Terrett live for us there in New York. Now, Monday marks the second Sustainable Development Goals moment of the Decade of Action. The event serves as a snapshot of progress towards the 17 SDG goals. However, even before the pandemic, Africa was off track in ensuring good health for all by 2030. COVID-19 further exposed weaknesses in healthcare systems and pushed many to near collapse. More on the lessons learned and steps for countries to take with CGTN's Adel Al-Makhrawi.
Long queues at public clinics, patients struggling to get admitted into public hospitals. That was the usual in many African countries before the coronavirus. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit, the continent's healthcare providers witnessed unprecedented demand for their services.
In Africa, because of the limited resources, as we know, so that would put immense pressure, and in some places we could see the health systems there nearly collapsing. And this is what we saw in Tunisia, for example, when the health service there being under huge amount of pressure, many cases of COVID-19, very slow campaign of vaccination as well.
Despite the shock the pandemic caused in African healthcare, parts of the continent appear to have avoided the devastation seen in more developed nations. Experts say it's because developing nations have a strong civil society which assists governments in providing basic public services.
We don't have the Western style of healthcare. We don't have comprehensive health insurance, but we have strong civil society, which to a great extent worked hand in hand with governments and public health sectors to provide diagnosis, medicine, and social support, to supply ventilators and oxygen cylinders. That's our secret of passing the waves in a fairly acceptable way.
In Egypt, pharmacies play an integral role in diagnosing and prescribing medicine to patients, which during the pandemic acted as the first line of defense that helped scores to get treatment at home. The vaccination phase, on the other hand, exposed the African pharmaceutical industry's limited capabilities, leaving the continent relying almost entirely on imported jabs. Africa is unlikely to meet the September global vaccination target set by the World Health Organization.
It's only 3% of the overall population of Africa received their vaccinations in mid-September. And if we compare these figures to the figures in Europe and the USA, we will see a massive gap. In Europe, about 65% of the overall population in the United Kingdom, whereas in Africa, the target by end of September, it's about 10% of the overall population. And there are many challenges stopping that target to happen really in Africa.
At least 12 African countries have reached or crossed that 10% vaccination target for the end of the month.
Africa's largest economies like Egypt, Algeria and Nigeria are not among these nations. The pandemic is a wake-up call for the healthcare services and standards in the continent. But even if the lesson has been learned, most African countries cannot afford to develop. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Well, earlier we spoke to Olalekan Oshankoya, a policy analyst and researcher at Citizen Commons International. He shared his assessment of how COVID-19 has slowed Africa's development progress.
There is no doubt that the pandemic has a significant impact on the potential of the world to achieve the goals of the SDG. And as you can see, a big part of the world poverty is in Africa. And then the effect of the COVID pandemic means that more people, more families, more communities have been put further into poverty because they've lost their livelihood. They have not been able to keep their life together because of the effect of the pandemic. There have been companies closing down, institutions not being able to advance their commercial activities because of the pandemic. And I think the United Nations pushed out a report that suggested that over 168 people in Africa alone will be pushed further the line because of their to poverty, extreme poverty actually, because of the impact of the COVID pandemic in 2020 and moving beyond that. So it's important to get Africa fascinated, because the pandemic is still here, it's not gone yet. I mean, we dealt with the initial effort to actually deal with it, but now that we have vaccination, we have to increase the potential of the African population to receive this vaccine. At least that way we know that we are reducing the potential of any other waves or any other comeback of the pandemic in the continent. And then another good thing I know that a few effort has been put in place that making sure that there is increased number of vaccination being made available by other countries, and then what we just have to do a whole lot more in educating the communities to actually take these vaccines when they become available. To make sure that the vaccines are available is one thing, to actually make sure that the communities and the myths surrounding the vaccine are removed, and then people are encouraged and are actually taking the vaccine.
Here in Kenya, lack of clean water has pushed residents of Eburu village in Nakuru County to trap geothermal steam to generate clean water. And CGTN's Nick Mudimba now reports for a long time the residents had to walk long distances to get the precious commodity.
En route to Eburu village in Naivasha, that is in Kenya's Nakuru County, we meet this young man who has walked a long distance to get water. It's an area where getting the much needed commodity has been a challenge for long. But the residents seem to have found a way out of their misery. They are condensing geothermal steam into clean water that caters for most of their needs.
Kwanza tunaweka hii chuma ya chini hii ndio inaingia ndani ya shimo.
We put long metallic pipes deep into these holes to trap the steam. We attach it to the condenser, which holds all the gas and reduces pressure. We put the condensers in a slanting manner so that once the steam gets inside, the water will come out.
Nayo maji yanatiririka chini.
The metallic pipes increase the cooling effect, and as the residual steam escapes the tank, more of it cools and drains back as clean water. The reservoir on the ground collects the hot water, so the water is clean and safe for drinking.
We didn't have sources of water here, no rivers, no wells. This is our only source of water here in Eburu. I have been raised using this water. This is what we have been using domestically, feeding our cows, washing clothes and everything. This water tastes so fresh and it's so good that it can't give you complications.
According to the World Health Organization, sharp geographic, social, cultural and economic inequalities persist, not only between rural and urban areas, but also in towns and cities. People living in low-income, informal or illegal settlements usually have less access to improved sources of drinking water than other residents. In 2015, 91% of the world's population had access to an improved drinking water source, compared with 76% in 1990. 4.2 billion people now get water through a piped connection. 2.4 billion access water through other improved sources, including public taps, protected wells and boreholes. 663 million people rely on improved sources, including 159 million people dependent on surface water. Globally, at least 1.8 billion people use a drinking water source contaminated. By 2025, half of the world's population will be living in water-stressed areas.
Kwa mtungi tulikuwa tunalipia 50.
We used to pay for water and getting money is a challenge. But now things have changed since this place was fenced by Rhino Arc and the steam water is now sufficient for all of us.
Imebadilika, maji ya steam pia imeongezeka.
The geysers are few and the potential keeps diminishing. This being communal land, one has to seek the green light from community leaders to trap the steam. For those using the high temperature generator to boil their food, they kill two birds with one stone. Clean water is essential for quality life, and residents here are happy that something they were born and got here is still serving them even centuries now. But there's only one challenge they're having: corrosiveness of what they're using to actually trap the water. For now, they're only using this to survive because they have no wells, they have no rivers to cater for the quality and quantity of their water. Nick Mudimba, CGTN, Nakuru County, Kenya.
Still in Kenya, the efforts of one farmer are helping to save wildlife from prolonged drought. Patrick Kilonzo is delivering clean drinking water to herds in the Tsavo National Park, as CGTN's Daniel Arab-Moy reports.
These animals are struggling to adapt to the drastic reduction in rainfall and drying up of their habitat. They face severe water scarcity due to prolonged drought. But hope is on the way. Driving over 70 kilometers, Patrick Kilonzo is bringing water to Kenya's Tsavo National Park. Taita is home to one of Kenya's largest wildlife sanctuaries within the Tsavo National Park.
Getting water here, it's not easy. It's really a rare commodity in this area. So, it is something that we value it so much. And so that's the distance actually that we are covering. If I don't deliver water, animals will die automatically because there is nowhere you can get water here in the park, especially when it's not raining.
Unlike many others who track and sell water to residential areas, Kilonzo is doing it to save the animals. Kilonzo admits it's not an easy task.
Like sometimes you go, you find other trucks also fetching water for other reasons. So you have to wait probably 1 hour or half an hour, depending on how many trucks are ahead of you. And then from there, you bring the truck here. And, when the truck is full of water, it goes very slowly. So it may take you 1.5 hours to be here.
According to the government, wildlife-based tourism accounts for approximately 10% of the country's GDP. Kilonzo says he's driven by the devastating effects of past droughts in the area that wiped out nearly 40% of the animals. The Tsavo waterman is also building water ponds to conserve water during dry spells.
With drought and no rain in sight, the need for water has never been greater in Kenya's Tsavo National Park.
Kenya recorded below average rainfall during the long rains between March and May this year. With the rain still not in sight, authorities are looking for alternative solutions.
We are also trying as much as possible to educate and create awareness to sanctuaries and also conservancies which are surrounding us to make sure that they come up with water structures, including water ponds and tanks, so that they can store water during rain season for use during dry spells.
Patrick Kilonzo depends on donations to support his water tracking. He hopes that with his efforts, fewer animals will die due to lack of water. Daniel Arab-Moy, CGTN, Taita, Kenya.
And let's now go to Uche for your latest business news.
Thank you, Lindy. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Uganda enacts its first ever climate-related law to deal with the climate crisis. And the Royal Dutch Shell company to start producing low-carbon jet fuel at scale by 2025.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now, the China Media Group and the Dubai Expo 2020 have signed an agreement making CMG the only official Chinese media partner of the event. Now, the Expo Dubai 2020 was originally scheduled to run from October 20th, 2020 to April 10th in 2021. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, it was rescheduled to start on October 1st, 2021 to March 31st, 2022. This will be the first expo to be held in the Middle East, with 192 countries having confirmed their participation. Now, CMG is expected to launch a 6-month large-scale program called Expo Time, covering the opening and closing ceremonies of the expo, theme activities and country pavilions. Dubai's Tourism Authority expects that the expo will attract some 25 million visitors for its 6-month duration. And moving on now, Uganda has taken steps towards dealing with the climate crisis with its first ever climate-related law. Now, the government hopes the new national climate change law will help the country adapt to the adverse impacts of climate change. Here's CGTN's Leon Senyange with more.
It's a first for Uganda, a law on climate change. It will enable the implementation of better climate change response measures and also provide for a coordinated national approach. The government says the law will help Uganda to pursue its voluntary mitigation targets under the Paris Agreement and United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change.
In our local context, we must make our laws, depending on our level of capabilities and also level of socio-economic development. And that's what we did. So we believe that this bill will help Uganda really to address climate change.
Some provisions in the law also require relevant ministries to integrate climate change education in the national curriculum. Uganda has previously struggled with the implementation and enforcement of climate-related policies due to lack of a legal framework. Now, with an existing legislation, environmental campaigners say the country is in a good place in dealing with climate change. With its variable weather, Uganda is susceptible to both flooding and drought. These remain a major threat to the country's national development goals.
The effects of climate change, of course, are widely spread. There's a whole spectrum, depending on where somebody is coming from. There are effects on an individual level, there are effects on an institutional level, there are effects on community level, there are effects as a country at large.
But adapting to the damage caused by climate change is likely to be a financial burden on developing countries like Uganda. Currently, the bulk of the required climate finance is provided by developed countries.
The West is equally challenged by the COVID pandemic. So we are saying private sector should open doors to civil society actors so that they support some of our activities that are supporting government policy in the area of climate change.
Uganda's ambition in dealing with climate change could pay off sooner. The country has already committed to reducing its emissions by 22% by 2030. Leon Senyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
And moving on now, oil trader Royal Dutch Shell plans to start producing low-carbon jet fuel at a scale by 2025. This is also its attempt to encourage the world's airlines to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Now, the company says it aims to produce 2 million tons of sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF, in sector lingo by 2025. It will be a tenfold increase from today's total global output. Now, SAF is produced from waste cooking oil, plants and animal fats, and could cut up to 80% of aviation emissions. That's according to Shell. Aviation accounts for 3% of the world's carbon emissions and is considered one of the toughest sectors to tackle due to a lack of alternative technologies to jet-fueled engines. SAF accounts for less than 0.1% of today's global aviation fuel demand, primarily because it costs up to 8 times higher than regular jet fuel. Meanwhile, Nigeria's central bank has announced it is working with BIT Incorporated as a technical partner in a bid to launch its own digital currency this October. Now, the Apex Bank expects the e-Naira to accelerate financial inclusion in Africa's biggest economy. It also expects the digital currency to enable cheaper and faster remittance inflows, as CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam now reports.
For a long time, Nigeria's central bank was averse to cryptocurrency trading. Much so, it directed all financial institutions to close accounts operating in crypto exchanges. But the Apex banks made a complete reversal, recruiting Barbados fintech company BIT Incorporated as its technical partner. BIT's role would be to help Nigeria mint and distribute its digital currency, the e-Naira.
What makes us excited about what is called the digital currency or the cryptocurrency is the aspect of this currency to appreciate in value. If the demand for this e-Naira is also so demanding, is on the increase, I believe that it is something that not just Nigerians, it could also serve as a cross-border payment all over the world. Gradually, it could be a currency that a lot of other countries will also be interested, those that do business with Nigeria.
BIT Incorporated was selected from over 100 eligible bidders. Among other reasons, the fintech firm was chosen for its technological competence, efficiency, and platform security. The e-Naira is scheduled to launch on October the 1st, which is the country's 61st independence anniversary. But industry players question the central bank's decision to engage a foreign company for its local digital currency.
We have consultant companies, in the crypto and blockchain space who can offer this kind of service to the Nigerian government. The CBN knows, they know that we have these capable hands, but we can't figure out what happened, why they chose to, contract this out to, a foreign organization.
According to leading Bitcoin marketplace Paxful in 2020, Nigeria is the second world's Bitcoin market after the US. The e-Naira is capable of accelerating financial inclusion and cross-border trade. It would also provide faster remittance inflows and cheaper transaction rates.
Cryptocurrency have the advantages of going up and going down. For example, I kept my 10,000 Naira. It has the ability to increase more to 20, 15, even 50,000. But in a situation whereby I have 10,000 today and tomorrow I need to use it, or next week I go back and I see $2,500, $2,000, 2,000 Naira, sorry. But those are the disadvantages.
The government has yet to release the project blueprints for the e-Naira, but the central bank says it will be regulated.
I would recommend the government deploy a decentralized network and, of course, come up with a regulatory framework for the crypto space and, of course, the blockchain technology space.
The e-Naira would be supplied by the Apex Bank to licensed financial institutions for onward supply to individuals. Upon its launch, the CBN will provide an interim e-wallet for customers. Experts are hopeful that the West African nation will harness financial technology and the many opportunities in blockchain technology. Kelechi Mekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
And now to some international news. China has launched a plan to expand the opening up in financial industry by leveraging Hong Kong's status as a global financial center. Now, the government will unveil steps to promote the use of the renminbi for cross-border settlements and improve foreign exchange management. It will also deepen cooperation in green finance among Guangdong, Hong Kong and Macau through unified green finance standards. New mechanisms will also be set up for cross-border financial trading and international payments. On the same note, China will take steps to further internationalize the yuan via Hong Kong. The State Council Information Office says northbound transactions through the Shenzhen Hong Kong Stock Connect exceeded about 28 trillion yuan or 4.3 trillion US dollars by the end of July this year. Now, Pang Gongsheng, Deputy Governor of the People's Bank of China, says the renminbi cashing pool in Hong Kong crossed 800 billion yuan during the same period. The central bank will expand offshore yuan services by launching cross-border renminbi pilot projects in Qinghai Economic Zone and also step up cooperation between Hong Kong and the Chinese mainland on green finance, as well as fintech and financial regulations. And China has sent more cargo to its under-construction space station. It took off on Monday from the Wenchang spacecraft launch site in Hainan province in the south of the country. Here's CGTN's Zhang Yibing with an update.
Another launch to supply China's new space station, carrying some 6 metric tons of cargo. It came immediately after the return of 3 Chinese astronauts from the space station. But the cargo on board the Tianzhou-3 spacecraft will help with future missions.
Tianzhou-3 has some technologies that we will use in the core module of the space station. We also hope the cargo ship will play an important role in the ongoing construction and operation of the space station.
The rocket that carried the spacecraft along March 7, Y4, was modified for the mission. Engineers say they're learning a lot as they go, and this is benefiting the overall project.
The mission is a great success. Compared with previous missions, there weren't even tiny flaws in the whole launch process, either from propellant filling to the tests, or from the launch and the flight and to the satellite rocket separation.
The success of the launch has extra meaning too.
Together with the manned mission behind it, the Tianzhou-3 cargo craft launch marks another big step for China's space station in low Earth orbit, set to be complete by 2022. Zheng Yibing, CGTN, Wenchang.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but coming up later on Global Business Africa, the Ghana Integrated Aluminium Development Corporation partners with Rockshore International Company to develop bauxite in the country. All that coming up at the top of the hour. For now, back to Lindy.
Thanks, Uche. Well, let's take a short break. Here's what's still ahead on Africa Live. Coming up, our new series on women making a difference. Tonight, we look at how a Nigerian woman is playing a pivotal role in childhood cancer interventions.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. We take a look now at how women across Africa play pivotal roles as change agents. In Nigeria, childhood cancer is one area that is yet to receive much needed attention. But one woman is changing the narrative by engaging government and communities with childhood cancer interventions. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam tells us her story.
39-year-old Kemi Adekonye leading a walk against childhood cancer in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. It's the 5th of its kind. The mother of 3 is pushing conversations and interventions around cancer in children. She lost her brother to the ailment in 2017. That incident sparked deep compassion in her to raise support specifically for kids who face similar ordeals.
What we do, if there's a child that has a need for financial support, the hospital communicates with us directly and we try to help as much as possible. But even at that, we still have the personal relationships. We still do birthday parties for children. We still do children's day parties, Christmas parties, and all of that. We've helped some parents get jobs.
So far, Kemi has come through for more than 60 pediatric cancer patients. 10-year-old Shitu Adewumi is one of the beneficiaries. He's all clear after being treated for leukemia at age 6. He now looks forward to a brighter future.
I am happy I am cancer-free now. I want to be a doctor in the future, so help other children.
She broke the news to me that my son is having cancer of the blood. I said, cancer? Where is it from? Nobody has this in my family. Cancer of the blood. I fainted immediately. They are trying to gather some money. That is when the Okapis, they came into our life. She gave me a hug, she greeted me, and she greeted the child too, and she gave us an envelope.
The World Health Organization, WHO, estimates that 400,000 children are diagnosed with cancer yearly. Those in low-income countries like Nigeria are 4 times more likely to die of the disease compared to high-income countries. Awareness and intervention for childhood cancer here is low, and case management has been difficult. Treatment facilities and funding are inadequate.
Presently, there hasn't been much support from government. In fact, even the NHIS that initially had provision for free laboratory basic tests lately withdrew their services. In the last 4 years, our support for children with cancer has been great. She had brought hope to many families caring for children with cancer.
Despite the emotional burden of losing some of the children, limited finances, and low government interventions, Kemi continues to count her wins with every child that survives. Her goal is to push until she garners the much-needed support for children battling the deadly disease. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Let's go to the Democratic Republic of Congo now, where a group of artists have created elaborate costumes from trash and other discarded materials to highlight the numerous problems that people living in the capital, Kinshasa, face. Our correspondent, Crystal Chamringa, caught up with the group and filed this report.
Bubbling with creativity, Congolese artists display outfits made from rubbish collected from different parts of the DRC's capital, Kinshasa. From plastics to broken mirrors and electric cables, they have all been turned into costumes. And in typical Kinshasa style, the artists hit the streets to flaunt their costumes. But it's not just for show.
I designed this costume to awaken the conscience of our leaders to the problem of power blackouts in Kinshasa. We have had many cases of women being sexually abused by men because of a lack of electricity.
Other artists chose to highlight the dangers of poor waste disposal and the injustices committed by Belgian officials during the colonial period.
I designed this costume to raise awareness about the suffering that our great-grandfathers experienced when they were forced to collect rubber by Belgian colonialists. I'm also highlighting pollution in factories and the automobile industry.
This sculpture represents our ancestors, and the message they have for all of us is that we should recycle the rubbish on our streets and transform it into products that will have some importance in our lives.
Eddie Ekete is an artist who founded this festival known as Skin Art. He's been organizing workshops to introduce young people to different art forms. This year, his mission was to advocate for a cleaner city.
Our environment in Kinshasa is very dirty, so we decided to organize this art festival to educate the public about the hazards of poor waste disposal. We want to have a clean city in the future. That's why we have taken our unique artworks to the streets.
These young Congolese artists are looking forward to a brighter future, but their country's dark past characterized by conflicts and political instability, is still a stumbling block to their careers. These artists have found a subtle way of drawing the world's attention to the problems plaguing the Democratic Republic of Congo through their creative costumes. Their advocacy for a cleaner city and the provision of better social services has attracted many people to their workplace in Kinshasa's Molokai village, an area renowned for producing great artists and musicians. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Coming up in your sports news, up next. Countries scramble to qualify for the ICC Africa T20 Cricket World Cup.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find